Chapter 61 Move Forward. Assault Gun. Middle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After hearing the driver's drivel, Whitman smirked. He was clearly in a good mood. With a nimble hop, skip, and a jump, he clambered onto his tank and popped open the driver's hatch. You guys need a roadmap? Let's roll. Move it, at Whitman's command, the remaining 3 crew members, fresh from their maintenance checks on the number 3A assault gun, scrambled onto the tank and into their positions. Slapping on their headsets, he slammed shut the commander's hatch above him, simultaneously activating the headset mic clip to his cap. Pressing the throat mic, Whitman's voice crackled over the airwaves toward the armored forces staging area. Radio check, over. Whitman here, calling command. Awaiting confirmation. Over. He didn't wait long. A crisp voice echoed back in his ear within seconds. Comms confirmed, loud and clear, Sergeant Whitman. This is Lieutenant Heisenauer, 2nd Armored. High Command has tasked your assault gun platoon with supporting our upcoming assault. Looking forward to a smooth op. Over. Though technically in the same division, Whitman, never one for socializing, didn't know this lieutenant, despite the difference in rank. Their relationship was strictly professional, defined by the chain of command and shared service. After hearing Heisenauer's response, Whitman held down the mic button and paused momentarily before firing back a question. Lieutenant Heisenauer, if I may, can you share the attack direction and plan? Don't sweat the details, Sergeant Whitman. Just follow my lead and advance on the target. I'll designate targets as we engage. Whitman, used to the Army's colorful characters, wasn't fazed by Heisenauer's arrogance. He simply replied, his tone even. Understood, sir. Just point me where to shoot. Soon, Whitman's assault gun platoon, for number 3 as in total, merged with Heisenauer's main offensive force, unleashing a thunderous barrage like a mountain crumbling. Boom, boom, boom. Their air superiority in yesterday's battle had neutralized most of the enemy's Soviet artillery. Now, the German artillery could finally flex their muscles, unleashing a pre-assault bombardment that, while smaller than the Soviets' usual displays, was still impressive. The backbone of this barrage, laying down the heaviest firepower, was the 150mm SFH-18 heavy howitzer, while its range and performance were underwhelming compared to Soviet counterparts. A division-level heavy howitzer battalion fielding a dozen of these SFH-18s could still unleash a devastating and psychologically impactful attack. Perched on his vehicle, leaning halfway out of the hatch, Whitman raised his binoculars to assess the bombardment's effectiveness. He scanned the grasslands and the quiet village, now a chaotic mess of exploding shells. A veteran of countless brutal battles, Whitman lowered his binoculars and couldn't help but sigh. Hope those artillery guys actually hit something. Here's hoping this makes our job easier. The German army, known for its combined arms blitzkrieg, couldn't match the Soviet Union's artillery supremacy in either scale or firepower. When the half-hour barrage finally subsided, Whitman, anticipating the order to move, ducked back into the hatch and settled into his commander's seat. All units, this is Lieutenant Heisenauer. Follow my orders and advance. Target, Soviet village 5 kilometers directly ahead. Secure and hold until further orders. Let's go. With a roar of engines and billowing black smoke, Heisenauer's mixed mechanized battle group tore forward. German infantry, armed to the teeth, rode in SDKFZ 251 half-track personnel carriers. These soldiers were definitely better off than the Soviet infantry, who were stuck playing human shields. As the German battle group roared towards the target, kicking up dust and smoke, Lieutenant Heisenauer scanned his surroundings through the 360-degree camera mounted on the commander's cupola. Seeing no immediate danger in the battered village, the young lieutenant, confident they were about to seize the first key location without a fight, confidently popped the commander's hatch and leaned out, binoculars in hand. Chapter 62 Move Forward. Assault Gun. Down. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Holding the telescope, he scanned the silent Soviet village ahead, a landscape shattered by German artillery. Heisenauer's rapid rise to lieutenant, while his peers were still in the ranks, wasn't just because his father was a major general. His combat skills and leadership during previous battles played a huge role. Bouncing along in his number 3 J-type tank, inching forward in second gear, he saw nothing suspicious through the telescope. Lieutenant Heisenauer, clad in a black SS uniform and bathed in the sunrise, keyed his throat mic. Maintain search formation. Numbers 23 and 24, advance and be ready for Soviet infantry. Numbers 23 and 24 were Panzer II tanks under his command. These outdated tanks, armed with a 20mm rapid-fire cannon and a 7.92mm MG-34 machine gun, weighed only 9 tons. They were already obsolete, unable to effectively engage even the most common Soviet BT series and T-26 light tanks. However, the 20mm and 7.92mm guns, while unable to pierce tank armor, were lethal against unprotected targets. The Panzer II was often relegated to anti-infantry roles. Its rapid-fire cannon could easily penetrate anti-tank gun shields, eliminating the Soviet crews behind them. Its light weight and the MG-34 allowed it to quickly eliminate soft targets while remaining impervious to small arms fire. Heisenauer's first order was to use the Panzer IIs to deal with any potential Soviet infantry ambushes before encountering enemy tanks. Acknowledging the order, the crews of numbers 23 and 24 revved their engines and accelerated to the front of the formation, ready for any Soviet infantry. Heisenauer heard the confirmation and saw the tanks move into position. Frowning slightly, he kept scanning the seemingly peaceful, dilapidated village. An uneasy feeling, a sixth sense, kept Whitman on edge. He saw the serious expression on Whitman's face in the small mirror. Gunner Klink, puzzled, asked, "See anything, Michel? Where are the Ivans hiding?" "I don't know, Klink. But I have a bad feeling about this village. It's like a trap, waiting to swallow us whole." "A trap? Ha!" Klink scoffed. "You're an SS commander, Michel, not a poet. It's a wrecked village. What's wrong with it? Maybe one lone Ivan waiting to jump us." Whitman adjusted the periscope, continuing to observe. Finally, he spoke. "You idiot. Doesn't the silence bother you? Sure, people hide after shelling, but what about the animals? Guard dogs? They don't shut up. Or do you think we killed every animal in the village?" Klink was taken aback. As Whitman pointed out, the farm animals and guard dogs weren't trained soldiers. Frightened by the shelling, they would be running around, barking from their kennels, making noise that could be heard for hundreds of yards. But this village, just hit by artillery, was eerily silent. It was unnatural. Even the sounds of frightened animals were missing. Klink finally realized the problem. "Damn it, this is a trap, Michel. The Soviets got to the animals." Whiz *boom star. A BR-350B 52mm armor-piercing round screamed through the air. Before Klink could finish speaking, the Panzer II's front armor was penetrated. The fuel and ammunition detonated, launching the thin turret skyward. "One down. Kirill, armor-piercing round, quick." Chapter 63 The Fox and the Hound, Part 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When the gun smoke cleared in the cold morning air, the muzzle of an F-34 76.2mm tank gun was visible, sticking out of what looked like an old, run-down barn at the edge of the village. Whitman, who had been watching closely, finally spotted it. "There it is. Klink, 200 meters at 1 o'clock, in that broken-down barn, there's what looks like a Soviet tank. Load a high-explosive round and smoke him out." "You got it, boss." "High explosive, loading," the loader's voice boomed from the back of the tank. Klink, in one fluid motion, cranked the main gun's controls, aiming the barrel at the barn. "Good luck, Ivan." Click star. With that quiet thought, a 75mm high-explosive round shot out of the barrel, heading straight for the target. Fired from Whitman's short-barreled howitzer on his Type 3A assault gun, the round, with a muzzle velocity of only 550 meters per second, covered the short distance almost instantly. Boom star. The 75mm shell, packed with 680 grams of TNT, detonated, tearing apart the old barn. Burning bits of straw rained down, revealing a T-34/76 medium tank, number 177, now exposed on the battlefield. Nice shot, clink. Armor-piercing round up next. We can't let this T-34 slip away, thought before Whitman could finish, Lieutenant Heisenar's furious voice crackled over the comm. Damn it, Sergeant Michel. I told you, your assault gun platoon doesn't fire without my order. Pull back immediately and let the tanks and infantry handle these Ivans. I'll call you when I need fire support, understand? Whitman was speechless. His shot had clearly messed with Heisenar's plan. Swallowing his frustration, he had no choice but to comply. Understood, Lieutenant. Will do. Attention, assault gun platoon, cease fire and hold position. Make way for the infantry. Whitman's 4 No. 3A assault guns, trailing the main force, immediately stopped their advance. At the same time, the SDKFZ 251 half-tracks in the center of the battle group screeched to a halt on Heisenar's order. SS soldiers, armed with Mauser 98 Burmese Chots and MP-40 submachine guns, piled out, forming attack lines and advancing toward the village, using the tanks and half-tracks for cover. Armor Company, armor-piercing rounds on that Soviet T-34. Target its tracks, try to immobilize it. Heisenar wanted to pin the T-34 that had scored the first hit. But Malyshenko, commanding from inside the T-34's turret, knew the importance of maneuverability. Serioza, reverse. Full speed, get us out of here. Nikolai, machine gun the German infantry. Keep them pinned behind their tanks, don't let them get close, ****. Responding to Malyshenko's orders, Serioza wrestled with the controls, reversing the 28-ton tank. Simultaneously, Nikolai, the radio operator, opened fire with the 7.62 mm DT machine gun mounted in the hull, spraying bullets at the advancing SS soldiers. What are you doing? Wolf. That damned Ivan is reversing, giving our infantry hell. Why aren't you firing? Heisenar screamed from his commander's position. The gunner, struggling to crank the turret around, replied tensely, he's backing up. Heisenar. I'm trying my best, but it's not easy to hit a moving target. Give me a minute. The Panzer III's turret relied solely on manual power. Even with maximum effort, it turned at a snail's pace. The Panzer III lacked a dual-flow transmission system, meaning it couldn't turn its hull to speed up the turret rotation. Aiming at a stationary target was manageable, but trying to track a moving one was a nightmare. Seizing the opportunity while the Panzer III's turrets were still slowly turning, Malyshenko, already facing the Germans after his ambush, waited for Kirill to reload and then slammed his foot on the firing pedal. Eat this, Hans. Boom! Another BR-350B armor-piercing round roared out, but because Serioza was reversing at full speed, the tank was shaking violently. Without a gun stabilizer, Malyshenko's shot missed, not as accurate as before, *****, the shell glanced off the turret's armor and ricocheted into the dirt. The deafening clang echoed in the confined turret, a chilling reminder of how close they'd come to death. Heisenar felt a surge of adrenaline. Realizing the gunner in the T-34 was a serious threat, he roared another order. Damn it, Wolf. If you don't fire, I will. Those Ivans are putting the Reaper's scythe to our necks. Shut up. Stop pushing. You're making it worse. I know what I'm doing, just let me focus, okay? Amid the shouting match between commander and gunner, Wolf frantically cranked the wheel, finally getting the T-34 in his sights. Chapter 64 The Fox and the Hound, Part 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Convinced his gun was on target, Wolf, a veteran of countless tank battles, slammed his finger down on the trigger. Later, Ivan. Boom. The 50mm KWK-38L/42 gun on the Panzer IIIJ roared, sending a Type 40 tungsten core armor-piercing round screaming towards Malyshenko's T-34, traveling at 3,445 feet per second, the Type 40 was a prized shell among German tankers. It was a special kind of armor-piercing round, different from the standard full-caliber rounds of World War II. It used a tungsten alloy core. Germany lacked its own tungsten ore, essential for making these shells. To solve this, before Japan's invasion of China, Germany traded arms and supplies with the Republic of China for resources like bristles, vital for cleaning artillery barrels, and tungsten ore. Bristles were even a strategic material for the U.S. military at the time. China was a major hog-raising country. These tungsten ore shipments from China enabled the Type 40 to become legendary in battles involving Tiger and Panther tanks. Unlike most early war full-caliber rounds, the Type 40 was a sub-caliber armor-piercing projectile. It had a traditional steel shell, but inside was a slender tungsten alloy core designed to penetrate enemy armor. When the shell hit a tank, the steel casing would deform, but the tungsten core, under immense pressure, would break free and punch through the armor. This meant better penetration against heavy tanks compared to standard steel shells, but it came at a cost. The Type 40 couldn't detonate inside the tank, because it only had the tungsten core. There was no space for explosives. It relied on the core itself and spalling, fragments of the tank's own armor, to kill the crew and damage equipment. Often, a shot would only wound or kill one or two crew members, leaving the tank combat ready. Despite this limitation, the Type 40 remained a mainstay of German armor throughout the war. From 20mm autocannons to the massive 88mm gun on the King Tiger, Type 40 rounds were a favorite. Later in the war, China became an enemy, halting tungsten imports. Allied bombing raids on Norwegian mines further strained Germany's supplies. This meant German tanks, especially the Panzer IV, often lacked the Type 40, forcing crews to rely on standard 75mm shells against increasingly advanced enemy armor. Even elite crews in King Tigers and Jagdpanzers only got a handful of Type 40 rounds, severely limiting their effectiveness. But in 1941, at the start of Operation Barbarossa, Germany hadn't yet reached that point. They weren't counting their remaining shells, worried about running out. The Germans, having seized Norwegian mines and stockpiled Chinese tungsten, were relatively well supplied. The elite guards divisions had priority access. Knowing the disadvantage of their Panzer IIIs against T-34s, Wolf had ordered the loader to chamber a Type 40 from the start, hoping to deliver a knockout blow. However, due to his hasty aiming, the Type 40, capable of penetrating 90mm of vertical steel at 500 meters, struck the heavily sloped front armor of Marashenko's T-34. The shell bounced harmlessly off. The T-34's 60-degree sloped armor easily defeated the round. Chapter 65 The Fox and the Hound, Part 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Heisenauer watched through his periscope as the Type 40 tungsten core armor-piercing round, marked by its white tracer, slammed into the front armor of the opposing T-34. It hit at an angle, deflecting the shot. He exploded at his gunner. "Wolf, damn it, Wolf, are you blind? The guy's got his hull angled. Aim for the turret, got it?" Wolf, his right eye glued to the gun sight as he frantically adjusted the turret, wasn't exactly thrilled with the feedback. "He's moving, Heisenauer. That's a tiny, moving turret. It's not easy. Besides, what about the other guys? Can't they lend a hand?" But before he could finish complaining about his team's inaction, the remaining Panzer IIIs, which had been flanking Heisenauer's command tank, finally started firing. Boom, boom, boom. Just like Wolf, the other Panzer crews, knowing the T-34's thick armor, opted for the Type 40 tungsten core rounds, with muzzle flashes. Several of these rounds, traveling at over 3,000 feet per second, slammed into the T-34 almost simultaneously, one into the front, one near the tracks on one side, and another on the opposite side. Inside, Maleshenko felt like he was in the middle of a New Year's Eve artillery barrage. "Damn, these Germans aren't letting up. Anyone hit?" "Report," thought he was okay, but that didn't mean the rest of the crew was. The impact of the steel on steel still ringing in his ears, Maleshenko shouted to his crew. Even knowing the T-34's reputation for toughness, he was worried about taking 3 armor-piercing hits at once. Sweating, Maleshenko didn't have to wait long. "I'm okay, Seriosha. Nikolai's good." "Sir, we've got a fuel leak." A fuel leak? Hearing Kirill's report, Malyshenko frowned, realizing the gravity of the situation. He crouched down to look at Kirill, who was next to the ammo rack. Kirill was covered in black oil. Thick diesel was smeared everywhere, and more was leaking from the fuel tank underneath the ammo rack. Damn it! Bad timing for a fuel leak, that from what Malyshenko could see, the shell had impacted the side armor hard enough to cause the armor to spall inside, and the fragments had punctured the fuel tank. Even though the T-34 was well armored, the side armor was still weaker than the front. The Type 40 rounds, while losing energy, were still powerful enough to cause internal damage. Fortunately, the fragments hadn't hit anyone, but they breached the fuel tank. Luckily, the T-34, designed for frontline combat, had multiple fuel tanks. The tanks in the chassis and engine compartment meant the T-34 could keep fighting even with one tank breached, and, for added safety, the T-34 used a diesel engine. Unlike the gasoline engines in German tanks, even if the tank and fuel tank were hit, the viscous, slow-to-ignite diesel offered crew members greater safety, reducing the risk of fire and improving survivability. The German tanks, relying on gasoline engines, weren't so lucky, with the constant threat of penetration. A fuel tank hit on a German tank could easily lead to a fire and catastrophic accidents in seconds, often killing or burning the crew, or even detonating the ammunition. Soviet infantry, recognizing the flammability of German tanks early in the war, when anti-tank weapons were scarce, resorted to using Molotov cocktails, tossing them onto the engine compartments of the German tanks. The burning gasoline and alcohol would flow through the engine's ventilation system, igniting the engine oil lines and vaporizing the gasoline, setting the tank ablaze or causing the fuel tank to explode. Malyshenko, knowing the safety advantages of Soviet diesel engines, wasn't overly concerned about a single fuel leak. He returned to his position and ordered Kirill, "Don't worry about the fuel leak, Kirill. Wipe off the shells and load them, quick. The Germans are coming." "Yes, comrade commander." Kirill hurriedly wiped the diesel off the shell and raised it towards the loader. Armor piercing, ready. Chapter 66 Waiting for Hans, Part 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kirill's roar was his cue. Even before the loading was complete, Malyshenko had already lined up the gun and, without hesitation, slammed his foot on the firing pedal. Boom. Another flash, another armor-piercing round launched. Malyshenko, now feeling 70% certain of a hit, targeted a vehicle that had just stopped, ready to fire on tank number 3, just like the tank number 2 he'd taken out earlier. This one took a shot to the turret, detonating the warhead inside. The explosion blew the turret hatch open, sending thick black smoke billowing into the sky. The 108 grams of TNT in the 76mm BR-350B round exploded almost instantly, unleashing a storm of shrapnel and flames that killed everyone inside, including the commander and the other 3 crew members. Through his gun sight, Malyshenko watched the wreckage of tank number 3 belch smoke. The surviving mechanic, electrician, and driver scrambled out in a panic. Before the remaining German armor could retaliate, Malyshenko ordered a retreat. Driver Seriosha expertly reversed the tank, disappearing behind a row of wooden houses at the village entrance. Lieutenant Heisenauer watched through his periscope as the T-34 that had just ambushed and destroyed 2 of his tanks vanished into the village. The endless rows of wooden houses, typical of the Soviet countryside, completely obscured his view. He'd lost the target again, and fury welled up inside him. Damn Soviet bastards! Cowardly dogs! All vehicles, advance in search formation, alternating cover. Infantry and half-tracks, move into the village and find that Soviet tank. We will destroy it. Heisenauer's order, though delivered in anger, was still rational. The SS soldiers trailing the tanks and half-tracks immediately gripped their weapons and surged forward. Under the protection of the half-tracks, which could withstand small arms fire, the cautious SS infantry advanced toward the silent Soviet village. Theoretically, Heisenauer's strategy of sending infantry ahead to scout was sound. The Panzer III tanks, bulky and with hand-cranked turrets, were slow to maneuver. If they entered the village and were ambushed again, they'd be trapped and vulnerable. When facing a hidden enemy, sending in nimble infantry to locate the T-34 before committing the armor was the best course of action, but that plan relied on one crucial assumption, that there were no other Soviet troops in the village besides that single T-34. Otherwise, the unsuspecting German infantry would walk straight into a deadly ambush. Heisenauer, a competent commander, knew the risk. However, the fact that no other Soviet forces had opened fire during the T-34's initial ambush led him to believe there were no other troops present. Besides, Heisenauer was furious. He couldn't just let the T-34 get away after taking out 2 of his tanks. It would be a blow to his pride, to his reputation, and potentially to his career. He wasn't about to back down. I'm right. There's just one T-34 in there. Like that KV-2 at Razinyi a few days ago. These lone Soviet tankers have guts, even if they're outnumbered. Heisenauer, seeking confirmation, recalled the story of the lone KV-2 tank. He subconsciously linked the two events, convincing himself that he was dealing with a similar situation. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became. He was facing a lone T-34, slowing them down, buying time for others, just like that KV-2. Now fully convinced, Heisenauer pressed the communication button. Schlein, Reinhardt, move your troops into the village in search formations and find that lone T-34. Secure the area quickly. We have other priorities. Order received, Lieutenant. Will comply. Heisenauer watched through his periscope as the German infantry, using SDKFZ-251 half-tracks for cover, cautiously approached the village entrance. Before Malyshenko could even crack a smile, the driver Seriosha, who had seen the scene through his window, asked, "Comrade Commander, do you think those Germans will take the bait?" Chapter 67 Waiting for Hans, Part 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Seriosha asked his question, Malyshenko didn't answer right away. He took one last drag on his cigarette, then flicked the butt, practically burning his fingers, against the bulkhead. He'd snuck into the village on the road and gotten drunk for less than a minute before speaking to his crew. Whether they bite depends on how sharp these Germans are. We've thrown out the bait. We knocked out one of their 2 anti-infantry Mark II tanks. Now it's up to Dyakov to take it from here. The Dyakov he mentioned was a lieutenant in the mechanized infantry regiment of the Soviet 20th Tank Division. This lieutenant, who'd survived German artillery fire with his cunning tactics and evasive maneuvers the day before, had taken over command of his infantry battalion after the commander fell. As a temporary acting battalion commander, he led about half a battalion of soldiers to support Malyshenko in defending the small village. This village was strategically important because it served as a crucial, though seemingly insignificant, link between the 20th Tank Division and the 131st Motorized Infantry Division on their right flank. It was the only passage through the area. If the Soviets lost this village, the German armor could quickly penetrate deep behind both divisions. This would create a pincer movement with the main German forces attacking head-on. Even if the Soviet defenders held, morale would plummet. The entire unit could collapse and surrender. The German forces breaking through the link between the divisions would then have a clear path to the Field Division headquarters, and even the 9th Mechanized Army headquarters further back. After a serious assessment of the situation the night before, and realizing the gravity of the problem, Political Commissar Petrov, knowing a little about military command but far from an expert, summoned Malyshenko in the absence of the division commander. Cherniev, who was too drunk to be of any use. He made a crucial decision. Comrade Malyshenko, the area between our 20th Tank Division and the 131st Motorized Infantry Division is this small, easily attacked village. It's not easy to defend this village, with no natural defenses. In fact, it's very difficult. But we have to hold this key point. You know the consequences if we lose it. Petrov's expression was grim. He gestured to the map, and Malyshenko understood the disastrous consequences of being surrounded if the Germans broke through. Knowing the Germans excelled at large-scale maneuvers and encirclements, Malyshenko understood what Petrov was implying. I understand, Comrade Political Commissar. That's why I'm here. Give me my orders. And so, Malyshenko was assigned to this deserted village and reinforced with less than half a battalion of infantry to strengthen the defense. A company of infantry, along with his first tank company's 4 T-34-76 tanks, were all Malyshenko had to defend this strategic location. Petrov couldn't really be blamed for not sending more troops. The 20th Tank Division had taken heavy losses. The motorized infantry regiment was more than half gone, and the tank regiments, the core of a tank division, were down to about 30 tanks, half of which were obsolete BT series and T-26 light tanks. In this dire situation, sending half a battalion and 4 reasonably well-maintained T-34-76s was the most Petrov could muster. Initially, Petrov had considered asking the neighboring 9th Mechanized Army's 131st Motorized Infantry Division for help, but when Petrov called the 131st Division headquarters, the news he received amid the snoring of Division Commander Cherniev shattered his hopes. "Comrade Petrov, it's not that our 131st Division is unwilling to help, but we simply can't spare any more troops. We've sent all our security troops to the front lines to fill gaps. The only reserve I have is myself, a dozen staff officers, and the Signal Corps. We're stretched to the limit, Comrade Petrov. I hope you understand and find a way to manage." After hanging up the phone, Petrov felt lost. He never imagined he'd feel indebted to Malyshenko. He murmured to himself, feeling a little defeated. "In the end, I, the political commissar, didn't do my job well. Malyshenko, you have to pull through." Chapter 68 Waiting for Hans, Part 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Malyshenko, who had gotten his troops into position early that morning and started setting up defenses, had spent a lot of time thinking about how to defend this little village in such a crucial location. Normally, the best way to defend it would be to build a circular defensive network with trenches and temporary defenses outside the village overnight. But after considering the few soldiers he had left and the endless flatlands around the village, Malyshenko knew things weren't good. After a lot of back and forth, he made a bold decision: to bluff them with an empty city strategy. "Lieutenant Dyakov, this village is a tougher nut to crack than it looks. The Germans have the offensive advantage, and we're short on troops and defensive weapons. If we try to hold our ground, we'll be playing right into their hands. They'll wipe us out in an hour with their superior numbers. So, I've decided to ditch the traditional trench warfare and skip the outer defenses. We're going to wait and use a few tricks to take them down." Dyakov, the acting battalion commander and a military academy graduate who had risen quickly after the Great Purge, didn't quite follow. "Captain, I'm a little lost. If we don't build any defenses, how are the infantry supposed to fight?" "Simple, Lieutenant Dyakov." Under the bright moonlight, Malyshenko snapped his fingers, his tone now full of confidence. "When the battle starts, I'll use my T-34 to attack the German vanguard. After taking out a few tanks, I'll lure them into chasing me back into the village. I expect the Germans, who've had an easy time of it so far, to jump at the chance to take out my lone tank. That's when the infantry, hidden in houses and bunkers, will ambush them from all sides. Once we take out the German infantry, their tanks will be useless in the village. Even if the infantry just throws Molotov cocktails at their engines, they'll be toast. Those German tanks use gasoline engines. Just get some flames into the engine compartment, and it's showtime." The more Dyakov thought about Malyshenko's plan, the more he liked it. But he still had a few concerns. "But Captain, what if the Germans send too many tanks? Our infantry won't be able to handle it. We only brought 2 76mm anti-tank guns. They won't be enough." Malyshenko, already prepared for this, responded immediately. "Don't worry about that, Lieutenant Dyakov. Besides my command vehicle, the other 3 T-34s will be hidden in houses around the village, waiting for a chance to ambush the tanks. You and the infantry just need to clear out the houses and set up some camouflage. Then, let the Germans come to us." With these detailed plans in place, Malyshenko, hiding his number 177 command vehicle in a broken stable with a cigarette in his mouth, waited for the battle to begin. A low-flying German single-engine plane quickly caught his attention. "German plane overhead, Commander. Are they here to bomb us?" asked Seriosha, the driver. Sounding a little scared, Malyshenko put out his cigarette on the tank's bulkhead, took a deep breath, and said. When have you ever seen the Germans use an old single-engine plane for bombing? That's an artillery observation plane. They're getting ready for a big artillery barrage to find our positions and mark them. Seriosha seemed even more worried. Isn't that worse, Commander? If they spot us, won't we be under artillery fire soon? You ask too many questions. But since you asked, I'll ask you one. If you were the pilot of that observation plane, would you waste your time on a small, deserted village with no defenses? Seriosha had never considered that. He hesitated. Before Seriosha could answer, Malyshenko, who knew he was taking a gamble, spoke again. The German artillery won't waste their limited shells on a village where no one is. Unlike our Red Army's artillery superiority, those German artillerymen are much more careful. Malyshenko was right. Less than half an hour later, the German offensive began with an artillery barrage. But most of the shells targeted the main defensive positions of the 20th Tank Division and the 131st Motorcycle Division on either side of the village. The little village at the junction of the two divisions only took a dozen or so shells, which didn't cause too many casualties for Malyshenko and his men. Soon after the shelling stopped, Malyshenko saw the German mechanized battle group of infantry, tanks, half-tracks, and assault guns through his periscope. He gave the order to his crews, who were ready to go. All right, comrades, get ready to fight. Kirill, load armor-piercing rounds. Seriosha, wait for my order to reverse and retreat. Nikolai, check the machine gun and prepare to deal with the German infantry. First, let's take out a Panzer II and give Dyakov and the others a little breathing room. Chapter 69 The Blood-Stained Unknown Village. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The burned-out remains of cabins lined both sides of the village entrance, the air thick with the acrid smell of charcoal. Inside, SS soldiers, clutching their Mauser P-40 submachine guns, cautiously moved into the village. Lieutenant Dyakov, peering through a crack in the wooden wall, saw the German infantry less than 100 yards away. Gripping his PPSH-41 submachine gun, he turned to the heavy machine gunner beside him. See those German half-tracks? Their machine guns are the biggest threat. We take them out first. Without those mobile gun platforms, the rest of the German infantry won't stand a chance. Don't worry, Comrade Lieutenant, I've got this, the gunner replied softly, pulling back the bolt of his heavy machine gun, ready to unleash hell. He wasn't holding just any weapon, but the DSHK 12.7mm heavy machine gun, a legend in its own right. While the Russian name DSHK might not ring a bell for everyone, this Soviet-made heavy machine gun, which dominated the Eastern Front during World War II, became well known in China during the Sino-Soviet honeymoon after the war, in the early days of the People's Republic of China. When the country was rebuilding from the ground up, the complete production materials and design blueprints for the T-54A medium tank from the Soviet Union were essential to create a country that could independently manufacture and maintain tanks. The T-54A tank, one of the most advanced tanks in the world at the time, was a significant achievement. The Chinese-produced version of the Soviet T-54A medium tank was the Type 59 medium tank. Along with the blueprints for the T-54A tank, they got the manufacturing plans for the DSHK 12.7mm heavy machine gun that was mounted on its turret. This classic Soviet-made heavy machine gun, which had proven its worth in World War II, became a constant partner for the armored soldiers. The DSHK heavy machine gun in the hands of the gunner had been loaded with a special armor-piercing bullet chain, specifically designed to take out lightly armored targets. These large-caliber armor-piercing incendiary tracer rounds, with a bullet diameter of 12.7 by 108 mm, packed a serious punch against armor. They could penetrate up to 25 mm of high-quality steel armor at a 90-degree angle within 500 meters. While that level of penetration wasn't enough to threaten German tanks, it was more than enough to rip through the SDKFZ 251 half-tracks, whose frontal armor was only 8 to 10 mm thick, as the SS infantrymen huddled close to the Type 251 half-tracks. Scanning for movement, the DSHK heavy machine gun poked out of a window less than 100 yards away, ready to attack. the red tracer bullets, accompanied by the deep thump of the DSHK 12.7 mm heavy machine gun, shattered the silence over the village. Caught completely off guard, the driver of the lead German Type 251 half-track had no time to react. The armor-piercing incendiary rounds ripped through the front of the Type 251 half-track, tearing through the fragile armor. These 12.7 mm armor-piercing bullets, tearing through the driver, co-pilot, and a gunner manning the MG-34 machine gun in the back. They were dead before they hit the ground. After hosing down the Type 251 half-track, the Soviet heavy machine gunner didn't stop. He swung the barrel around, loaded the ammunition belt, and started firing on the SS infantry who were trying to use the half-track for cover. The Soviet 12.7 by 108 mm armor-piercing incendiary rounds tore through the armored vehicle. Those SS infantrymen who instinctively dove behind the Type 251 tracked vehicle paid the ultimate price. At the same time, the Soviet infantry who were waiting for the signal opened fire on the Germans entering the village. Mosin-Nagant rifles, PPSH-41 submachine guns, DP-28 light machine guns, and the DSHK heavy machine gun. The SS infantrymen were getting hit from every direction at once. There was no safe place to hide. The heavy machine gunner, now on his second ammunition belt, watched the SS infantry twist and fall to the ground. He laughed, pulling the trigger again. "Huh, come on, you naughty little bastards." Greetings from the Kiev Communist Youth League. Chapter 70 Glory Soaked in Blood. You are listening at MTnovel.audio. The terrifying gunshots ripped through the false calm, echoing like a storm of bullets over the small village. The deafening blasts brought my greatest fear crashing down. It happened. Lieutenant Heisenauer jammed his throat mic and barked, "Schlein. Reinhardt. Report. What's going on in the village?" Heisenauer, already sweating bullets, didn't have to wait long. A burst of panicked words, mixed with intense gunfire and more explosions, crackled through the radio. "Lieutenant Heisenauer. We're ambushed by the Soviets. Taking heavy fire. Schlein's hit in the gut, bleeding bad. Ivan's got a crossfire set up with heavy machine guns. Our half-tracks can't take those armor-piercing rounds. Damn it. Why won't those bastards just surrender?" He cursed inwardly, then quickly sized up the situation. Infantry alone wouldn't cut it. Heisenauer made a snap decision. "Reinhardt, hold your position. I'm bringing the armor in. We're flattening that shithole village." "This is a direct order." In the Type 251 half-track, Reinhardt listened to Heisenauer's order, his eyes fixed on Schlein, who sat hunched over, hand pressed to his bleeding abdomen. Bullets whizzed overhead. Reinhardt bit his lip and spoke into the radio. "Sir, Schlein's bleeding out. He needs immediate medical attention or he's a goner. Request permission to pull back and evacuate the wounded. We've got guys hanging on by a thread in here." "Negative, Reinhardt. It's easy to get in, but it's hell getting out. You think Ivan's just gonna let you waltz out of there? If we retreat, those bastards will just change their defenses and set up new ambushes. We'll be walking into another bloodbath, maybe worse. Understand?" Reinhardt glanced at Schlein, whose breathing was becoming shallow and ragged. He looked over at the driver's seat, now a mangled mess thanks to a Dushka machine gun. He knew he couldn't reason with a commander hungry for glory. Reinhardt made his decision, responding with a weary resignation. "Understood, Lieutenant Heisenauer. We need that support ASAP. I'm taking command." He tossed the bloody communicator back to the radio operator. Reinhardt, sporting a fresh gash on his cheek from a grenade, barely noticed. His focus was on Schlein, clinging to life beside him. He knelt beside Schlein, ready to speak, but Schlein beat him to it, his body already cold. "Reinhardt. Did Heisenauer screw us over again?" Reinhardt paused. He couldn't pull rank now. He spoke softly, trying to offer some comfort. "Don't worry, Schlein. Heisenauer promised me he's bringing in the tanks and assault guns. We just need to hold on until they get here. Then we'll turn the tide. You gotta hang in there. Turn the tide. Yeah, right. This is just like Abbeville a year ago. Heisenauer left a whole company to die against Charles de Gaulle. He got captured, but his daddy pulled strings and got him off scot-free. Schlein shifted weakly, clutching at the wound torn by a Soviet DP-28. The blood loss was intense. The 26-year-old felt his body turning to ice. Reinhardt, buddy, guys like us, without the connections, we're just cannon fodder for guys like Heisenauer. His old man might act like he doesn't like that his precious boy is in the SS instead of the Wehrmacht, but come on, which father doesn't love his son? While we still have some fight left, get everyone dug in around the buildings. I'm already a dead man, don't worry about me. You need to survive. We swore our loyalty under the Führer's portrait. Time to make good on it. Schlein's words, spoken with his last bit of strength, hit hard. All the field medics were dead, leaving Reinhardt powerless to stop his friend from slipping away. Hold on, Schlein. Heisenauer's got medics with him. You'll be okay. Don't give up. There were no tears, no dramatic goodbyes. Reinhardt simply clapped his friend on the shoulder, then grabbed his MP-40 and scrambled out of the half-track. As Reinhardt commanded the defense, Schlein's vision blurred. He could no longer feel his hand on the wound. In his mind, a classical record started playing, a haunting melody. Under the lantern, by the Baroque gate. We met again, as we did before. The night was heavy with love and fate. Now, only the lantern knows. My Lily Marlene, farewell to you.